Well, hello. Welcome to Legal Bites. Happy Thursday morning for everyone in the United States. And for everyone outside of those time zones, a happy general Thursday. If you guys are here, I see that we've already got some chats going. Hey, Eric Hunley. Hey, Nate the lawyer. Nobody. Also, Scott Allman. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you guys here. So today, normally I have at least one other lawyer with me talking about these legal issues, the latest in the law. But today, unfortunately, Nate can't join me, and I don't know if Kurt will be able to join. But we may end up having more folks joining. But for now, it's just me talking about a few of the most recent topics that have come up in the law. So personally, I've always loved having live streams with other lawyers because I feel like having a conversational style is best for these sorts of things, or at least that's kind of an area that I do better in, rather than doing a just straight up live stream where I'm talking to the chat and I'm otherwise monologuing, right? So, because otherwise I've found that I've been a little bit awkward in these sort of monologuing sort of live streams, but you know what, we're going to try it. We're going to roll with it, and we're going to see where it goes. So if you guys are watching this either live or on the replay, let me know what you guys think. Please be kind in your comments. And otherwise, we're gonna roll with it because we've got some really interesting things that we are going over, that we're talking about today, and I think that we can have some pretty interesting discussions. So if you guys have any thoughts, let me know what you think in the chat, and I'll probably be able to more directly talk with you guys today if I don't have another person on screen with me, other than, of course, Indy, who is usually here because she is basically my shadow. So we'll see if she hangs out for the whole live stream or not. At some point, she may hear my husband walking in the door, and she may start barking. So just a heads up for you guys. But otherwise, yeah, okay. Metro Chica, woohoo, finally made it. I'm glad you're here. Eldon Banling, good to see you again. So, all right, so let's get started. I mean, we've got three main topics that I wanted to talk about, and they're kind of recurring topics. I know we've talked about Britney Spears quite a bit. I know we've talked about the SB8 law quite a bit as well. But we'll see how far this discussion goes. May take an hour, maybe a little bit less, who knows? And then also in between, of course, everyone seems to be captivated by the story about Gabby Petito. It's totally tragic. It's awful. And it seems like it's getting weirder and weirder by the day, right? So I wanted to talk about that because there are, of course, some legal issues involved. And especially, I think, when it comes to the commentary around the internet, there's a lot of people that are making certain conclusions which are totally natural and I think normal, but there are reasons why the law is set up in certain ways. So for example, attorney-client privilege, not talking to the police, whether you can presume guilt or innocence from those sort of things. There is a lot that people are sort of inferring from this sort of situation, and they may or may not be, correct. But obviously, I think everyone has their suspicions about this particular case. And we're going to get into it. I'm going to talk about some of the background before we get into some of these suspicions and sort of where this might go from here. So anyway, like I said, let me know your thoughts in the chat as we go along. So we're going to start with Britney Spears. So there was another new filing in this case by Britney Spears' attorney, Matthew Rosengart. There were actually a couple filings. So one of them, and I will share my screen here. Here we go. Okay, so one of them is it's basically another response to Jamie Spears' petition to terminate the conservatorship. So if you've been watching live streams on this channel for a while, you probably are aware of the fact that Jamie Spears, the conservator of the conservatorship, conservator of the estate specifically, right? Because there are two different kind of divisions within the conservatorship. There's the estate and there's the person. So Jody Montgomery is the temporary conservator of the person. Jamie Spears is the conservator of the estate, basically meaning that he's the one that's handling the finances and the legal situation, like those kinds of questions. But when it comes to like her day-to-day care, that's Jody Montgomery. That's the conservator of the person. So in this particular case, Jamie, of course, has been fighting for a very long time to keep this conservatorship going, and he's been fighting to remain in his position as the conservator of the estate. And a few weeks ago, or maybe even a month ago, some time ago, relatively recently, he filed a petition to terminate the conservatorship. And so, this was a very sort of suspicious turn of events because it was such a 180. Thanks, Eldon. I will, let me pin that now. Perfect. Okay. Thank you for commenting that. So we've got that posted. It was a very suspicious turn of events, right? Because it was a total 180 from what he had been saying before. So since then, and so of course, so many people were very suspicious about what exactly he was trying to get at by filing that petition. Was it a good faith effort to actually terminate, or, because I remember when I was looking at that petition, I said that the arguments that he put in there were not exactly the strongest arguments. Like if I were actually Britney's attorney advocating to actually terminate the conservatorship, I would have put way more in there, way more information, way more argument. I would have said, these were her conditions at the time that she entered into it. Those conditions no longer exist, right? And so I would have said that I would have gone through sort of her medical situation to say she has really come a long way since then. She's really bolstered certain aspects of her life, that she's improved, and she's learned certain skills to handle the fame, to handle the industry, all this kind of stuff, to handle parenthood, because there were so many different things that she was going through at the time that she entered into the conservatorship. So that was a very sort of suspicious thing, that it was a very weak argument coming out of that petition that was filed by Jamie Spears, right? So since then, and part of the discussion was, what does this do for Britney's attorney, right? Because now it sort of puts them in potentially an awkward place, right? Because on the one hand, they've been sort of rattling the saber, right? By saying like, hey, we want this conservatorship to end. Britney said in court herself that she wanted the conservatorship to end. And yet there was no filing by any of Britney's attorneys in the past, to actually terminate the conservatorship. Hi, puppy. Are you coming to say hi? Yes. You want to talk about Britney too? Okay. Yes. I love you. But the thing is that they had never actually filed their own petition to terminate it, right? So it sort of forced their hand somewhat by having by requiring Rosengart, Britney Spears' attorney, to either say yes, let's terminate the conservatorship full speed ahead, or to say, well, actually, we don't really want to terminate the conservatorship because of XYZ. She actually kind of needs it. So these supplemental filings here were basically in response to Jamie Spears' petition to terminate the conservatorship, because remember, there's a hearing that's coming up on September 29th, which is going to be talking about all of these issues, talking about the petition that was already filed to remove Jamie Spears as the conservator, and then now the petition filed by Jamie himself to terminate the conservatorship. And so now this is a second supplement to the petition for Jamie's suspension and removal. So this was filed by Britney's attorney. There are actually two of them. One of them here is a much simpler one, because they had nominated one guy, Jason Rubin. They had nominated him to be the successor conservator of the estate to basically to follow Jamie Spears once he was removed. But apparently, I guess there were rumors that were going around previously where he was saying that he wasn't really sure if he wanted to do it. He wanted to back out. So now this kind of confirms a lot of those rumors and says that that they wanted to actually remove him as the successor conservator of the estate and put in another gentleman, John Zabel. So that's interesting because this is moving forward with the potential of Britney actually being in the conservatorship, first of all. So one thing that's really interesting here is that I think that it kind of gives a little bit of a delicate dance between not saying, okay, full steam ahead, let's terminate the conservatorship right now, but at the same time also not saying, well, we actually want it in place. So I'm just going to go through like a few parts of this petition without having to go in too deep into it because, I don't want to get too caught into the weeds. But here, so I'll kind of go through the introduction basically, so you can get a flavor of what the main arguments here are. So starting off, the title of the document: Conservatee Britney Spears verified second supplement to petition for suspension and removal of James P. Spears as conservator of the estate, pursuant to probate code section 2650J, consent to petition for termination of conservatorship of the person and the estate. So one of these things that's important to note here from that title is that it does have a consent to the petition for termination. So basically they're saying, first off, we're not fighting the fact that you want to terminate this petition. We're not objecting to it. And that is, I think, a very important part here because that kind of answers one of those questions of how are they going to respond to that petition given the way that Jamie sort of framed everything in that last petition. So here it says, on July 26, 2021, Britney Spears, through the undersigned counsel, filed a petition to suspend and remove James P. Spears as conservator of the estate, or suspension petition for short. Based on this court's broad discretion under probate code section 2560J, because that relief was inexorably in the best interest of Ms. Spears. As the petition provided, Mr. Spears' suspension was and is a necessary first and substantial step towards Ms. Spears' freedom and ending the Kafkaesque nightmare imposed upon by her father so that her dignity and basic liberties can be restored. And I think that's really interesting that they said that it's a necessary first and substantial step towards Ms. Spears' freedom. So it's almost as if they are saying that, yes, we want this termination to proceed. However, we don't necessarily want it to be immediate, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because somebody who's in Britney Spears' position has been in a conservatorship for 13 years. She has not been in the practice of managing her life and managing her career, not just as an adult, not just as a mother, not just as, now an engaged adult, but also as someone in the entertainment industry, in the music industry. And that is a whole beast on its own, right? And also being someone that has the level of fame that she does, because that also, even if she isn't touring, if she's not creating music, that is a lot to manage anyway. Because there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of interest in her life, obviously, seeing as we are talking about this case, right? And so many other people are talking about this case, and the whole Free Britney movement exists because there's so much interest in her life. So I think that's a really, really interesting point here. And I think that's a smart move by Britney's attorneys to say, to sort of point to, yes, that's moving in the right direction. And yes, we want to do it in the way that we want it to be done. So another kind of moving down. So it was a 4D chess move, says Eldon Bannerling. I think that there could be some 4D chess going on, because there also could be something to note is that there also could be a lot of correspondences that are going back and forth between the attorneys on this case that don't make their way into into any of the filings, right? Because often when, especially when you have parties that are trying to negotiate something, Britney's attorneys may be trying to negotiate an end to the conservatorship, or maybe they're trying to negotiate for Jamie to walk away from his role as the conservator. So they may actually be in regular communication with one another, that having conversations that we don't even know about. So there could be a certain layer here that we're not aware of, but that sort of informs the other steps in the potential 4D chess going on here, if that makes sense, right? So, and also Nick M. looks like the father wants to cut his losses. There are so many possible theories here as to why Jamie filed the last petition that he did. One of them that I think is potentially likely is the fact that Matthew Rosengart has said multiple times also that he's at least indicated, he's alluded to the possibility that Britney would want to be investigating Jamie Spears for embezzlement, fraud, all kinds of potential claims against him to recover funds from him that he's otherwise spent in other ways that was Britney Spears money. So I think that one of the things that he may be thinking is, if this conservatorship ends, that's one avenue that is foreclosed to them to sort of recoup those losses, recoup those funds, or to start hammering down on his door to try to get funds back from him. So he may be in a rush to terminate the conservatorship for that reason also. And he also otherwise might be just feeling pressure from the public, right? Because he is probably one of the most unpopular people in the United States right now, maybe around the world, but definitely I would say in the United States, right? Because it's I think that even in cases where there are people that are saying that the conservatorship may or may not need to continue, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. There are plenty of people that are still convinced. I mean, like myself, right? Like I'm still not entirely personally convinced that the conservatorship needs to end, right? Because we don't know Britney Spears' medical condition. We don't know, what her doctors are saying about her capacity, her competency, right? And so without that kind of crucial information, it's kind of difficult to say whether or not the conservatorship should end now that it's actually in place. However, I think it's relatively clear to most people, maybe I would think, at least to me anyway, that I think there's probably more of a likelihood than not that Jamie Spears has been a bad actor in this situation. So there could also be that sort of pressure that he may be feeling as well, that he wants to maybe back out and just sort of step away from all of that, maybe, possibly. But anyway, so coming back to this particular filing by Britney's lawyer. So one of the reasons, another one of the points that they make here in this introduction is that looking at paragraph 7, they say, evidently seeing the handwriting on the wall on September 7th, 2021, Mr. Spears did a 180-degree reversal of his initial positions, filing a petition for termination of conservatorship of the person of the estate of Britney Spears, the termination petition, right? So this is the one that we just talked about. Although Ms. Spears rejects her father's recounting of history and maintains that the termination petition was motivated by Mr. Spears' apparent self-interest, she fully consents to the relief sought in the termination petition and pleads for such relief expeditiously. So once again, they're sort of like reinforcing, like, yes, Britney Spears wants the conservatorship to terminate. She wants to get to the end of it. So she fully consents to it. And they said, that she wants it to be done expeditiously as well. So this sort of like reinforces them sort of softly saying like, yep, we're moving forward with it. But then this is another interesting point that they say, specifically, despite the termination petition, this court must still take up Ms. Spears' July 26 petition for an order suspending her father's conservator of the estate. And while the entire conservatorship is promptly wound down and formally terminated, it is clear that Mr. Spears cannot be permitted to hold a position of control over his daughter for another day. So here's basically kind of the rub here. And they point later to the fact that Britney recently got engaged. to Sam Asghari. Asghari is his last name, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But so they talk about the fact that she just got engaged and she's working on getting into a prenuptial agreement with him, which is a concern that a lot of people have been talking about in the Britney Spears movement too, or the Free Britney movement. And they're talking about how the prenuptial agreement is going to require communications with the conservator of the estate, and they don't want Jamie Spears to have anything to do with that. They said the prenuptial agreement process will require communications with and cooperation from the conservator of her estate. But as referenced above and well established in the record, given that Ms. Spears' relationship with that conservator, her father, is broken, Mr. Spears' continued involvement would impede the ability to negotiate and consummate a contract that all can agree is in Ms. Spears' best interests. So that's basically one of these big rubs here, right? Is that they were like, yes, the conservatorship should be terminated. At the same time, if it's terminated now, there's going to be a wind down process. We still think that no later than September 29th, he needs to be out. He needs to be gone immediately, effective immediately, fired, done for. So that way we can have somebody else that has a potential good relationship with Britney Spears, or at least has a neutral relationship with Britney Spears, right? Doesn't have a negative one, because they talk a lot about how it's impacting her mental health, et cetera, how she's not doing well by having her father be the conservator of the estate. And so they're talking about here how Britney Spears has also just gotten engaged. And so she's going into sort of this negotiation process for a prenuptial agreement, which, as I always like to point out, at some point anyway, right, that at some point during these live streams, during these videos, that none of this is legal advice, of course. So, anytime somebody is going to be getting married or going to be thinking about it, it's generally speaking a good idea to at least think about doing a prenuptial agreement, at least talking about doing a prenuptial agreement with the person that you are going to be marrying. Not legal advice. Not saying that everyone needs to enter into one, but it's something that is worth talking about for every person. And in this particular case, I think that in Britney's case, it probably especially is a good idea because of the fact that she has been burned by pretty much every single person that has been close to her in her life. So the fact that they have stated that she's doing that here, and that they necessarily will be involving the conservator of the estate, regardless of whether the conservatorship gets terminated. There's going to be, like I said before, a wind down process, right? And so they want, for however long that conservatorship is going to be lasting, at some point, that those will be that Jamie will have absolutely nothing to do with it, because if she enters into a prenuptial agreement with Sam, and her father is, a center spoke in crafting that agreement, in, having anything to do with the formation of that process, not only could that be toxic for her and for Sam, but at the same time, it's another one of those ways that he could involve himself in potentially the rest of her life. However long that it ends up lasting, hopefully forever, right? I mean, that's anytime somebody goes into a marriage, that's, we always hope for the best, right? So a couple of questions here. Eldon Bandeling, can't she end it and hire a finance manager or someone to take care of her finances? Well, so in order to end the conservatorship, it has to be ended by the court. Regardless of, this petition to terminate the conservatorship was filed by her father. She consents to it. Apparently, Jody Montgomery, the conservator of the person, also agrees that the conservatorship should be terminated. But first, the court could still say, actually, no, I think that this conservatorship needs to continue for a period of time. They would have to have some sort of a good logical reason for it, but it is possible. So Britney can't end it, unilaterally, obviously, because that's kind of one of the issues in this case, right? Is that she doesn't really have the ability to consent to really much of anything because of this conservatorship. But it is totally possible that, yes, let's assume that the conservatorship does get terminated, and she hires a finance manager. She hires some people to help take care of her finances. I mean, that would definitely be recommended in her case. Hiring people for finances, hiring a personal assistant. She may already have some people like that in her life, but that are just being directed by other people, like her father. So the question is whether or not she can adequately hire those people so that they are being effectively managed and that they are not taking advantage of her in return, if that makes sense. So, and your other question, do prenups still work in a post Me Too court? Yes, they do. They do, because so Me Too cases usually have to do with sexual assault, sexual harassment. That is a tort, right? That is where someone has done some sort of an intentional act to someone else, right? It's an unwanted touching, unwanted, environment that somebody creates that makes someone very uncomfortable because it's, in a sexual nature or something like that. But a prenup is all it is a contract, right? You are saying, this is how much I have, in assets ahead of marriage. This is how much you have, ahead of us getting married. If we divorce, this is how we're splitting things up. I have certain retirement benefits. You have a certain pension that you get paid, and this is how we're going to divide these up. If we have kids together, this is how we'll divide things up. If all kinds of different, you can have all kinds of different scenarios. So you can still have very much prenups in a post Me Too court. And yeah, Nick, I know you saw the cat. He'll probably be back down at some point, but he decided to jump on top of the bookcase. So anyway, so that's the Britney Spears. That's the Britney Spears situation here. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that my overall impression of the strategy here by Britney's attorneys is that they are probably, I guess, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, right? Hoping for the best would be the conservatorship ends and it gets wound down as soon as possible, right? And then the next tier after that would be the conservatorship ends. It takes a while to wind down, but they've been able to get rid of Jamie Spears, and so Britney doesn't have to deal with her father anymore as it's slowly winding down. Then the next tier down below that would be the conservatorship unfortunately continues, but they're at least able to remove Jamie Spears from the conservatorship. So it seems like for them, what has been reinforced over and over and over again is the fact that they absolutely want Jamie out more than anything. So here's an interesting question here by Iva. Can her father stop her from marrying while he is still a conservator? So that's a really good question. I am not entirely sure because as I've talked about before, there are varying levels of capacity, right? So in order to make certain decisions, you have to have capacity. In order to sign a contract, for example, this is in law school. This is what everyone would talk about when we all went through contracts was the Little Mermaid, right? How she enters into a contract to give up her voice so that she can have legs and she can go be a human for a while and follow the guy that she fell in love with from a distance or whatever. The fact that she's 16, she's under 18, signs a contract. The moment that everyone realizes, oh, you have to be 18 in order to have a contract be enforced against you, it sort of ruins the plot of that movie, right? So that's one way in which capacity matters is age, right? If you're over 18, you now have capacity to do certain things. So, but there's also certain levels of understanding that a person has to have for different things. And so getting married is you has one level of capacity that's required. Signing a will, and it depends on the state too, by the way. So sometimes you can have a will and a trust requiring two different levels of capacity. So if somebody signs a will, and then they sign a trust document, they might require one level versus another level. So getting married, getting divorced, those actually tend to, from what I've seen, they tend to have the lowest levels of capacity that I've seen. So in this particular case, generally speaking, when you're under a conservatorship, you really don't have any legal capacity to make any sort of decisions for yourself. And so sometimes that can be an issue if there are certain financial burdens that, you know, somebody wants to qualify for you know, Medicaid, and they're separated from their spouse for a long time anyway. And they, you know, they effectively have been divorced, but then they enter into a conservatorship and they can't get divorced. They can't qualify for certain benefits. I've heard of issues like that before. So to answer a question, I don't have the best answer, but there is a possibility that a conservator could potentially have an impact on someone trying to get married while they're under a conservatorship. And in this particular case, I would not be surprised if Jamie Spears at least tried to interfere, just given what we have seen. So yeah, but that's a really good question. So Eldon Banling. So judges can't throw out a prenup if the woman or rarely the man say they signed it under duress. Oh, no, they absolutely can. So that's for any contract, whether it's a prenup or whether it's a contract for services or whether it's a, you know, or even for a will or for, you know, a trust that, you know, talking about this sort of same sort of area of law, that anytime you have a document that somebody signs and they say, this is what I want to happen, you know, either a will or a trust or a contract that, you know, where you are exchanging certain things with somebody else, you know, you're making an agreement with someone else. If someone is signing under duress, if there is evidence of that, then yes, it can be invalidated. Any of those documents can be, because in order to consent to someone, you have to consent fully, right? No duress, no, not being at gunpoint, and no, you know, you can't have somebody where somebody is signing a document that they believe to be is one document that says one thing, but it says something entirely different, because, you know, the person that puts a document in front of them and says, here, sign this. This is what the document says. Don't bother reading it. And then they sign it and it says, you know, they've just given away all of their rights. That's the kind of situation where a document can be invalidated. So, but yeah, it's a lot of control over a person and their life, which is one of the reasons why this conservatorship, I think, has really held a lot of people's attention, because conservatorships they're a big deal, right? Because when somebody enters into a conservatorship, they don't, generally speaking, have the ability to make decisions for themselves. And I personally think that, you know, having worked in this area of law myself, I think that there are definitely cases where people are being abused within a conservatorship, but there are also cases where people are being abused outside of their conservatorship, and where being in a conservatorship is a lot better for them than otherwise. So it's a very tricky area of law, and it's a good thing that it's getting a lot of attention, because there are probably ways that it can be, you know, modified, updated, at the very least, have some oversight to prevent some of those issues from continuing to happen. So anyway, so now we are going to move on to Gabby Petito, because that is a very, that's a very interesting situation here, right? Because it's absolutely tragic. And it's one of those cases that it's like, as soon as it showed up, it really just like took control, right, of our national attention, because for whatever reason, and I know that there's been some, sorry, let me get this set up really quickly here. Okay. So I know that there's been a lot of criticism about the fact that this is, you know, there are people of color that are also that disappear all the time. A lot of them, especially women of color, Indigenous women, that kind of thing, that don't get the kind of attention that this is getting. And, you know, that's something that is, when there are that many people, that are disappearing and they don't get that kind of attention, it is sad. It is bad, right? Like we want all of these people that go missing to be found, hopefully safe and sound. But I think that maybe one of the benefits of this case is that now that it's entering public discourse, that we can sort of talk about these sort of situations. And it's just this particular one is a very strange one, right? So if you guys have not been following this, this is a case that started around a little bit after 9/11. It started to pop up that there was an influencer named Gabby Petito that had gone missing. She was a van life influencer, right? So she's got her Instagram here. I believe she's got YouTube as well. But she was with her boyfriend or fiance, and they were traveling from North Point, New York, across the United States, sort of taking photos and posting like a narrative, sort of a blog style sort of story to go along with it. And so she had quit her job apparently and had decided that she wanted to try this lifestyle, wanted to try being a van life influencer and sort of putting herself out there, just like a lot of us, right? Especially since the pandemic. I'm one of them. Starting a new YouTube channel, right? Trying to grow it and see where it goes. So she sort of struck out on her own, and she and her boyfriend were traveling across the country and seeing what would work. And the first thing that I remember hearing about it was they were traveling across the United States. She went missing. And on August 30th was apparently the last communication that she had with her parents. And then and she was in Wyoming, right? She was in Wyoming. And then already on September 1st, he was back in Florida, which is where the two of them were living before they left on this trip, right? So it was very suspicious that he traveled literally all across the United States without saying anything, without calling the authorities. And she wasn't with him when he was traveling all that way. That is someone that was definitely booking it across the United States, right? So this was definitely one story that has started with a lot of suspicion. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is that especially when there is a case like this that's developing in front of the world on a daily basis, is that obviously the authorities are investigating it, right? So they don't have all of the information. We don't have all the information. And so when we are in a situation like that does sound suspicious, such as this one, it's perfectly natural to have your suspicions, and it's perfectly natural to want to come to certain conclusions. But I would personally say that it's probably best to try to keep your brain at least 10% open to another narrative, because there's always the possibility that there's more information that we don't have that, if we did know, would change our perspective, right? So in this particular case, so let's go through, we could talk a little bit about just the timeline here, right? So just to get people up to speed, in case you've sort of heard about this case, hey, Rogan, nice to see you. Good morning. So just to sort of get people up to speed, in case you are kind of familiar with this, but you don't really know. So like I said before, they're van life influencers. They were traveling across the country. They left on July 2nd, 2021 to go across the country. And they ended up on the opposite side of the country in Wyoming, which is when end of August is when things started to seem off from her parents, apparently. And then on September 11th was when her parents in New York officially said they filed a missing persons case, right? Because they said, we have not heard from her. We haven't gotten any text messages or anything from her since like August 27th, August 28th, something like that. And they said that we're really worried about this. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening. And hey, Linda Marie, good morning. So since then, that was sort of what sparked the whole story. So coming back now that the investigation has been going on, there's been more information that's sort of been filled in. And it turns out that while they were on their way across, when they were in Utah on August 12th, 2021, there was an altercation that was in front of the or an altercation that was noticed by people. Somebody placed a 911 call, and so there's the cat again. Hey, Holmes. So there was a 911 call, and people were very concerned because of what they were seeing with the two of them being in a fight. And so the police were called. They managed to find them. They pulled them over. They had a conversation with them. And this is one thing that is getting a lot of criticism, is the way in which the police handled the situation and the way in which they ended up reaching their conclusion. So one of the things that was interesting is that the 911 call was talking about how Brian Laundrie, the boyfriend or the fiance, was very visibly arguing with Gabby Petito, and how he was actually getting physical. They were, that he was slapping her, essentially, is what they were saying in the 911 call. So, but then when you go to there's actual footage of the where is it here? Of the police stopping the van, right? So I'm gonna show some of this here now. And actually, wait a minute here. Okay, let's see if this will my audio. Wait a minute. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I don't know if you guys will be able to hear this. Okay. But this is the footage of when the cops actually were called and they pulled them over on August 12th. And then they had conversations with both of them about what had happened, what was the dispute that was going on. And I don't know if you guys can hear that. Can someone let me know in the chat if you can hear it or not? But people are talking. So you can see that Gabby's been asked to get out of the car so that she can talk separately to the cops, because she's visibly crying when they pull up and they pull them over. No sound. Okay, that's what I thought. Dang it. Okay, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me try it this way. Here we go. All right. Now this should work. Okay, you guys can hear it now, I think. Okay, so you can see that she's been...
229. I had this email that was in the passenger seat separated from the mail. Keys are on the hood.
Okay, so now we've got sound good.
Yeah, I don't know.
So he asked her what's going on, and now she's about to sort of give her take of what's happening.
Some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him. I just I guess my vibe is I hear him like in a bad mood, and I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job. Okay. I was a nutritionist. That was my job. Cool. And I just quit my job to travel across the country, and I'm trying to start a blog and have a blog and stuff. So I've been building my website, so I've just been really stressed, and he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of been I don't know, he's down there. I don't know, we've just been fighting all morning, and he wouldn't let me in the car before. And then
why wouldn't he let you in the car? Because of
your
OCD?
Told me I needed to calm down. Yeah. But I'm perfectly calm. I'm calm all the time. And he really stresses me out, and this is a rough morning.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't I sit you down in the back seat of my car? You're not in any trouble, okay? I'm not going to be putting handcuffs on you.
Okay, so that's her take. And then they go and they talk to him about what happened. So we'll see if, okay, let's see if I can do this. And they actually, I think, if I remember correctly, okay, maybe it's here.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her. So like I locked the car and I walked away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything. So I give her time. And we really had a nice morning, if anything, but she just got worked up because we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go like arches before this stuff like that.
Okay. You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had a cell phone in her hand. That's why I was pushing her away. Because she wanted me, I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not, go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute. She was getting a little worked up. And then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys to me. So I got in the way. I was just trying to, I know I shouldn't push, but I was just trying to push her away to go, let's just take a minute, step back and breathe. And she got me with her phone.
Can I see your hand? Oh, you got a mark right here.
Oh, that's from a wire.
That's from a wire?
Yeah.
You want to tell me about hitting that curb?
Hitting the curb was her grabbing the wheel.
She grabbed the wheel?
Yeah. She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she grabbed the wheel.
What about the speed? Did she take over the pedal on you?
If I was going fast, I'm sorry. No, it's probably just the moment of, I'm still shaking now. The adrenaline, seeing the lights flashing up, and then her gripping the wheel. So if I sped up, I'm sorry about that. Or if I was speeding beforehand, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it took quite a bit to catch up to you. So,
yeah. I'm sorry about that. We're just going into the park again to get water because we have a 6-gallon water container to fill up. So we're just grabbing water for the hike.
So yeah, so it's interesting to see their different takes on what had happened during that dispute. And so there's a little bit more sort of back and forth that the police go back to her and then they kind of ask her a little bit, and they asked her, did you grab the wheel? Because he said that you grabbed the wheel, and she said, no, I didn't grab the wheel. And it's interesting because, I know that Barbara O'Toole, you mentioned that little website, right? It does sound a little bit like he's being demeaning, right? He's talking about, she's trying to start this little thing, but it's not real, right? And she had mentioned, she was like, he doesn't really believe that I can do it. He doesn't believe in me. And so obviously there are issues that can come up in any kind of a relationship, right? Especially when you're starting something so new and off the wall, like a traveling blog of sorts, especially on Instagram, this sort of a life, it's different, it's new. And sometimes when you're taking a risk like that, ideally you have people around you that are going to believe in you, right? That are going to support you. In this sort of a situation, it looks like that wasn't the case. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's domestic abuse, right? Because you can have people that love you and care for you and don't necessarily think that you're able to do the things that you are, that you're trying to do in life, but not necessarily saying that this is not domestic abuse, right? Because it seems like not only is there belittling, there's also different accounts of what exactly happened here. And yeah, Linda, what you said, minimizing her and what she does is a mark of some abusers. It's true. Some abusers they'll gaslight. They will, they'll present things in a very different way, and it's, yes. So if you guys want to watch, this is like over an hour of body cam footage. It's very, very interesting to watch, to see the difference between the two of them. So I'm going to put a link in the description to this video so that you guys can check it out for yourselves. But it's very interesting to see that the difference between the two of them. I mean, she's obviously very visibly upset. And he's excited, which is common for getting pulled over, right? Like I've never been pulled over by the cops and been completely 100% calm, right? It's like as soon as you see lights in your rear view mirror, your blood pressure spikes a little bit. So that's normal, but this could also be an added situation where this is somebody who realizes that he's been sort of caught in a situation where he's doing more harm than good, right? And maybe he's even abusing his girlfriend or fiance. So one of the things that is most interesting about this, though, is that the cops ended up actually concluding that she was the aggressor in the situation, because they asked him about the scratches and stuff on his face, and he said that's from her hitting me with the cell phone. I was just trying to push her off of me, and she was and he's like, that's the only way that I was even touching her, was I was trying to to keep her away so that she wouldn't hit me, and but that's not exactly the way that she described it, right? But anyway, the thing is, I think that ultimately what they looked at is they looked at the fact that he's got scratches and marks on him. She doesn't have any scratches or marks on her, and the cops actually ended up almost charging her for the incident. And the both of them said, no, we don't want any problems. We love each other. This is just a little scuffle that we had. We both love each other very much. Don't arrest her. Which is kind of wild in hindsight, right? Because obviously it's so easy for us to say now, she's the one that has been, whose remains have been found, and he's somewhere, right? He's absconded since this whole situation. But I don't think this is the real Brian Laundrie, guys. But anyway, so the crazy part about this is that the cops actually were looking at her as the aggressor. And that's, I think, that one of the biggest things that has been that people have been sort of outraged about in this situation. So, now since the situation, since this has come up to light, the whole she disappeared. It may have been somewhere between the 26th, 27th. I think the 27th was the last time any sort of witnesses said that they saw her, because they were in a restaurant and they got into some sort of an argument at a Tex-Mex restaurant in like Jackson, Wyoming. So that I think was the last time that someone, with objectivity, said that they saw her anywhere alive. And then there's this sort of gap of time that we're not really sure what happened. But there are reports by other people that said that, on August 27th, I think it was, that he was hitchhiking by himself elsewhere in Wyoming, and said that he was just sort of camping and hiking on his own while his girlfriend was editing videos or editing, footage to upload, for her blog or whatever. And so he said that, while she's doing that, he's just off hiking by himself. So there are witnesses that said that he said that, and so they gave him a ride. And whether or not that's true, obviously will be something that will be litigated over probably, and sort of figured out with forensic evidence. But then we know that August 30th, there's a text message from her to her family. The family does not believe that it was her. The family believes that was Brian, sort of maybe CYA or Brian or someone else, most likely Brian, because he's the one that has otherwise had access to her cell phone, right? And that then he shows up on September 1st at his parents' house. Now, one of the things that there are a number of legal issues here that have sort of come up because of the sort of his behavior since then, right? Because obviously that's super suspicious, right? If you've been on this road trip across the United States with your girlfriend or your fiance, and there's this whole mission, then all of a sudden you show up at home by yourself and you haven't called the cops. Under normal circumstances, when you're in this kind of a close relationship, the moment that you realize that your other person is gone, that you can't find them, that's usually the time that you would report them missing, and that you would probably stay put to make sure that they get found, right? That's at least the way that most of us would be thinking about this kind of a case. But his behavior has been very, very different from that. And there are multiple possibilities. Either he's the one that is responsible for her death and her disappearance, or maybe he was there for it and, and it was someone else and he got scared shitless, who knows? Or there's another possibility that, maybe not saying that this is necessarily true because, I'm sort of posing possible ideas of possibilities that could have happened, that maybe they got into an altercation and, and he was thinking that it was self-defense. It doesn't seem very likely because of their difference in stature, right? She seems like she was a very, she wasn't exactly a CrossFitter, so to speak, right? So, there is a possibility that he could say, well, it was self-defense or something like that, that something happened between them. And so he was acting out of self-defense and something happened and then he got scared and so he ran away. There are many reasons why someone could flee that sort of a scene and not necessarily have it mean that they were the actual murderer, right? Or the person who is responsible for that person's death necessarily. Not to say that I have concluded that I'm defending anything with respect to that. I'm just stating some possibilities with, while this information is sort of is still being gathered, right? So now, since then, he was at his parents' house, and he lawyered up immediately, which a lot of people have found to be suspicious. However, personally, as an attorney, I think that is a very intelligent move, regardless of what his reaction or what his role in this whole narrative, right? Whatever it was that happened. Regardless, this is a situation where anyone involved at that level of closeness to the person that has disappeared and then been, whose remains have been found, that is the kind of person that would require a lawyer. And it is very smart for him to hire one, and it's very smart for him not to talk to the media and not to talk to authorities, because even if someone is entirely innocent, they have not done anything wrong, there is the possibility that if they have conversations with authorities, if they have conversations with the media, that there's always a possibility that someone can ask questions in a particular way that can end up creating a suspicion of guilt or creating a situation where it looks like they're making some kind of an admission, or sometimes even getting them to admit just so that they can get out of a certain situation, right? So there's a Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate. There's a reason why we have Miranda rights, for example. And it doesn't necessarily mean that just because someone is taking those rights and exercising those rights, that they are actually guilty of anything. So I think that one of the things that is a little bit frustrating in looking at the situation as a lawyer is some of the commentary by a lot of people, around this that are assuming that means that he's guilty. There's a very good chance that he could still be very guilty, right? Because like I said, a lot of his behavior has been odd. And, on top of that, the fact that he has since disappeared is also very, very suspicious, right? Because anytime, someone is a person of interest, it makes them even more interesting if they make themselves completely unavailable to the authorities, right? So the fact that he has apparently gone missing, the fact that he apparently left on Tuesday and then his parents reported him missing on Friday is also very suspicious. And so I came across some questions by some people asking whether or not his parents could have criminal liability. That's a possibility, right? And it depends on what it is that they knew, what it is that they did. One possibility is that they could be what's called accessories after the fact. So this is, there's 18 U.S. Code Section 3. I'm going to share my screen. 18, oops, where's this? Oh, wait, wrong way. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Here we go. 18 U.S. Code Section 3, accessory after the fact. So there's like 4 elements that are required in order for someone to be an accessory after the fact. So it's a person who, knowing that an offense against the United States has been committed, receives, relieves, comforts, or assists the offender in order to hinder or prevent his apprehension, trial, or punishment, is an accessory after the fact. So basically, someone has to know that somebody first committed a crime. Second, this is an activity that is after the crime has been committed. Then the person who would be an accessory, the would-be accessory, they have some sort of an act to assist the person, basically to prevent the perpetrator of the crime from being apprehended by the authorities, right? So allowing him to escape, giving him a window out so that he can go into a nature preserve and potentially disappear. It depends entirely on what it is that they knew that he had done, what it is that they knew, what his plans were. If they knew that he was planning on leaving on Tuesday, right? If they knew that he was planning on leaving on Tuesday and they said, okay, well, we'll leave the door open. We're going to be away. Don't tell us where you're going. That's one thing. If they had said, hey, here's a guy that has a boat who can take you to some other country where there are no extradition laws, that's an even greater act, right? So that's a potential. So there is a possibility of liability of his parents, but that depends entirely on what exactly they knew and what exactly they did in leading to him leaving, saying he's going camping in the nature preserve, et cetera, et cetera. So, like I said, this case is weird, and it continues to get weirder and weirder. But anyway, so kind of going back to some of these comments. Yeah, I mean, it is one of those weird cases, right? So we'll see how this continues to develop, guys. But otherwise, I wanted to talk about this is an interesting question. Will they be able to get phone GPS info to see how they moved during the problem? So, smash like because it's a weird case. Thank you. Yes, please do hit the like button if you guys are enjoying this discussion. So yes, I think that probably they will. It depends entirely on, if he had his phone on him, if he had it on airplane mode, that kind of stuff can definitely play a role. But my guess is that during their investigation, they probably will be able to access his phone records from whatever servicer he has to figure out, where he was on certain dates, where her phone was on certain dates, whether those pinpoints line up with his narrative, right? Or the narrative that he gave to other people. So for example, the people that said that they gave him a ride because he said that he was hiking for several days while his girlfriend was editing videos. But to Rogen's point, there's also a lot of spotty service in these areas too. So that would also have an impact. So I personally don't know enough about the tech to figure out, on a very clear level exactly how that would work. But I do understand, from seeing other cases that have developed where people have used cell phone towers to sort of pinpoint where a cell phone was at various points in time, and to be able to use that for a criminal case. So yeah. So like Liam said, both of their phone movements will tell a good story in the Times text. Absolutely. And especially because of the stories that other people have said that he said, or that he's told other people, or the text messages that family members receive from her, if they don't exactly line up to the narrative that's been told, all of that only increases the suspicion. So there are obviously a lot of questions here, right? So there are some answers. We now know that she's no longer missing. Unfortunately, she has been found. Her remains have been found. And it's absolutely tragic and horrible and awful. And there has been an autopsy that's been done. And we know that she is, so the medical examiner determined that it was a death by homicide, which basically means it was a volitional act that killed her, right? It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a suicide, it wasn't death by state, right? It wasn't an execution or anything like that. And so this was a medical determination that it was death by homicide, basically meaning death by volitional act, probably by another person. Whether that was him remains to be seen. Whether that was a third person also remains to be seen. Because if you guys were following this from like maybe a week ago or so, there was also another couple that had been murdered also in, I believe, Wyoming, in one of the campgrounds that they had visited nearby. It was a newly married couple. These two women had texted or had communicated with some other friends saying that there was some sort of a creepy man nearby that they were sort of worried about, and then both of them ended up dying. There was a question early on as to whether or not that case was related to this particular case. I think since then the police have said that that other case is that other case is actually not related. But it's interesting that those questions have sort of come up, right? Because of the timing of the two was really interesting. But keep in mind though, that just because the medical examiner determined that this is a homicide, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as a legal determination of homicide, right? Because that was something that during the Derek Chauvin trial, during the George Floyd trial, during that case, that there was a sort of a back and forth where the two sides were talking about the medical examiner's determination that George Floyd died by homicide, right? Because the defense was trying to say this is a death by overdose, and the prosecution was trying to say this was a death by homicide. This was the knee on the neck, right? And so the point that sort of came up during that trial that people were trying to sort of illuminate here was the fact of the fact that this is that a medical examiner saying that there was a death by homicide. It's not the same thing as a legal determination, right? Because it has nothing to do with intent. They don't look at whether or not somebody acted with intent, because they can't determine that from a medical examiner's perspective. So obviously that is something that still would need to be proven by a prosecutor in this particular case. So, so this was also another thing that was suspicious that sort of came out recently, because I think investigators were able to get a warrant into to examine the phone records of the mother, right? And because apparently Gabby Petito had supposedly texted her mom because she was getting all kinds of phone calls from her grandfather. But she referred to her grandfather in the text message as Stan, which is not something that Gabby ever did, which is one reason why a lot of people are very suspicious of the last few days of text messages that were sent from Gabby's phone, because they seemed uncharacteristic of her, because she typically did not refer to her grandfather as Stan. She referred to him as, I'm not sure exactly what, but definitely not Stan, they said. So, really, really interesting. But what are your guys' thoughts? I'm sure that most people are probably thinking that this is that Brian probably did it. There's certainly a lot of evidence out there already that stacks up, right, to suggest that he probably is responsible in some form or another, right? So hopefully he can be found sooner rather than later, and we can bring Gabby to justice, right? So anyway, I also wanted to talk about the abortion doctor, or the Texas doctor in San Antonio that said in the Washington Post, he came out earlier this week that he had performed an illegal abortion, illegal under the new SB 8, the Heartbeat Act law, right? But I don't know if I don't really have any time because we're already over an hour. But this has been really great. I may have to do another video on this on that particular topic. But yeah. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This has been definitely a very different live stream, right? Because I typically have other people to bounce my words and my thoughts off of and to get ideas off of them. But I hope this hasn't been too I don't know, boring or monologue-y for you guys. I know that you know, my personally, I don't think I do very well with monologues, but hopefully this was better for you guys than I was expecting, or maybe better than what I've done in the past. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative or, you know, useful at least. And yeah, please do hit the like button if you did enjoy it. Yeah, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. We do a live stream every Thursday. Typically I have other folks with me, but I mean, this was a nice solo trial run, right? So anyway, so yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, stick around for more videos. All right. See you guys.